Hello everyone for the webinar Wednesday sessions, and this is a really special occasion. We are talking with Gary Harpst today. He's a living legend. I'm going to introduce him really quickly. But you know what? My biggest issue coming from you guys is that, always we learn how to work on the companies that work in the company. So what's the secret sauce, how to do that? And I was thinking, you know what, Gary Harpst is the man we have to talk about, because he's a just I met him like 3-4 years ago, and we sit in his car having a chat, and he said me that Dinesh, I started work when I was 20, now I'm 60, so I'm pretty much middle of my career now. So I was saying, holy crap, I was like 32 or something like that, so that's the thing which I'm looking for. So actually, I please welcome Gary Harpst. Gary's background is he established Solomon Software, which you might know. It's an ERP software which bought by Great Plains and then Microsoft. And Gary has a wisdom how to run a company with a couple of hundred people. He still is working really many of companies. And down the road, he created a kind of solution for this working in the company versus working on the company things. And we were really involved in this whole journey down the road with him. We had this franchise to Hungary. So that was a really nice experience. So just... Gary, a couple of words about your stories, and just we have to rock because people are really interested on the secret sauce.
Well, I enjoy the time talking with you in the past and today as well. I think one place to start is where the idea for our company started. I was speaking in Montana in the beautiful mountains up there, and to a conference of CEOs who were there to figure out how to make their businesses work better. And they were getting away for a few days listening to best practices and principles for improving their businesses and making them work more effectively. And I remember one person at lunch said, I love this material, it's great, it's things I need to hear. But then he looked at me and he said, 2 years from now I won't be doing a thing about it. And I had just sold our prior company, Solomon Software, and I was thinking about my life and what I'd learned, and I couldn't get out of my mind that statement on the way home, flying home. And I thought, this is so true. I can't name how many times I've hired consultants, read books, gotten advice that made so much sense to me, and for one reason or another, never really was able to apply it. And so, as I think about doing anything successfully in life, whether it's personal or professional, it seems like there's two parts of the problem. There's the knowing what to do part of the problem, which is an expertise, strategy, and understanding part, and that's not a trivial part. But just as big, or if not bigger, is the fact that once you know what to do, for some reason, it seems like the forces align such a way that you often don't do what you know you should do. And so I've been spending the last really 10 years of my life thinking about how to help organizations figure out what they should do, which is a strategy part of the equation. But then, just as importantly, how do they get serious about following through and doing it? So that's been the focus of my life for the last decade.
Yeah, you pretty much have a wisdom for working on that kind of problems now. So actually, and what because I guess you work lots of people and try to crack the code, and I assume it's lots of personal human issues there, organization issues. Like usability issues, how you use a software. If it's easy, people are using it. If it's not, they are not using it. Lots of hurdles around the way. What you have learned down the road, that what was the biggest obstacles or hurdles?
Well, there are things that I would call satisfiers or barriers you have to get over. But if you remove those barriers, they're not enough. They don't provide the motivation. So I would put ease of use in software and friendliness and those sorts of things in the category of their barriers to entry. You have to satisfy those or you can't be successful, but they're not enough. They're not sufficient. And I tell a story that one of the most interesting business cases to me in life is a global company called Weight Watchers, and it's about a $4 or $5 billion company. And what's so interesting to me about that company is they're really about fitness. People think of it as losing weight, but it's way more than losing weight. It's about being a lifestyle of fitness. And I take from that analogy of that business some very deep lessons that apply to all of life. Most of us know how to be fit. I mean, we learn in kindergarten to eat right and to drink more water, and you can buy 1,000 books that tell you how ways to approach the system of systematically being fit, but nobody does it. Very few do it. And why is that? And their formula for success, and they've been doing this for 50 years, so they can give you empirical data that tells you how these 4 factors contribute to success. One is you need some kind of defined approach. Most of us flounder if we don't know, well, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. So that's one part of the problem. A second part of the problem is making it easy. We already talked about that. Technology or things that make it simpler to follow that approach are very helpful. And so tools can help lower the barrier to entry. But the third thing is what I'd call accountability. It's the human nature part of us that for some reason, our brains work in such a way that we don't like to be embarrassed. We don't like to be shamed. And we will put ourselves out. We will do things to avoid that happening. And so I'll give an example. I belong to a church, and I occasionally am asked to speak to that group. And I was admonishing people in that group, in our fellowship, to say, really, more of us should be coming to Wednesday night meetings so we can learn together. But I myself wasn't going to those meetings. And here I am telling people to go to the meetings, but I wasn't going. And someone came up to me a couple of weeks later and said, "Oh, I didn't see you at the meeting on Wednesday." And that one person asking me one time, making that statement, I've not missed a meeting since. Yes, and the point is that Weight Watchers has figured out that publishing a diet and giving you checklists and websites is not enough. The third element of the equation is showing up and getting weighed. And you go there, you pay them $15 to stand on a scales, which you could do at home. But what you don't get at home is the person on the other side of the scale looking at you and saying, you're up a pound, or no, you're down a pound. And for some reason, psychologically, we behave differently when there's someone in our life who knows what our goals were and then says, did you do it? And it's a self-discovery of a CEO or any business leader to realize that they themselves suffer from this same human challenge, that they don't do the things that they even know they say they should, just like me on Wednesday night. I know I should, but I didn't. And if you're going to build a great organization, you've got to recognize that just telling people and helping them understand what they should do is not enough. It simply is not enough. You need some kind of mechanism to draw people, confront them with what they said was important, and then cause a little pain when they don't do it, so that they change their behaviors. And then the fourth element, see, I've really mentioned 4 items, or 3 items. One is a methodology or some kind of systematic approach. The second is tools and technology or whatever that makes that easier. The third is the personal accountability. Somebody who knows what you're doing and asks how you're doing. The fourth element, we call shared learning, but at Weight Watchers, what it is that the people that are on this program get together and talk to each other after the meeting, after their weight, and they say, I've got holidays coming up. I'm going to have this problem. What do I do about it? And so this fellowship, this sharing of, hey, we're all in this together trying to figure out how to be better is part of the equation. So you ask one simple question, but it's a complex answer. We are complex people, and organizations are made up of complexity squared. Each individual is complex, and then you have 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 people, and you have complexity upon complexity. And that's what we've been studying the last 10 years, about how do you bring some order to this process, and how do you motivate people to stay on a program like this. A lot of people that go on a fitness program don't stay with it. And Weight Watchers will tell you that if you participate in all 4 elements of this program, your success rate is above 90%. If you quit going to the meeting and only do 3 things, then your success rate drops another 10 or 15%. If you just do the checklist and the methods, it drops again. You need all 4 elements of this program. So that's what 6 disciplines is all about.
That's just I think that's a big lesson to learn for we as humans or leaders, that we are starting with ourselves. So we analyze that we, based on our best intention, we are not behaving as we think are behaving. So that's like a self-explanatory kind of thing. The second takeaway is that, if I delegate something with someone, is just 2% of chance that's going to happen. And and I think it's really important that the people who are listening us have, I think, a really extra problem. That these companies, like, there are different sizes, like there are managed service provider companies, like 5 to 10 people companies, firefighting all the time. You are not able to delegate to anyone. Even you have to, you have the best technological people. So when third level support needed, that's you. So you have to break the barrier to have like a middle layer, and you are able to work on the company. That's one. And then you have this like 20 people kind of company when you are not meeting clients, you have salespeople, whatever, when you have to do something totally different, and you have challenges down the road when you have like 50 and more. And my biggest question is that, and I know that there are no shortcuts and kind of thing, but just observe the smaller people who just start to emerge, like 7, 8 people. Where they should focus to hit this barrier and probably move forward. So what do you see? What's the best focus area there?
Well, I think you're putting your finger on a very insightful point. When you start an organization or when you start a business, there's an idea in someone's mind about a product or a service you're going to deliver, and if you're going to be successful, all your energy is around how do I build and sell this thing, and that's all you're thinking about day and night, and how to satisfy customers, and how to make the product or service right, and then how to find the next customer. And if you do that successfully, as you point out, you end up with 2 people or 3 people or 5 people. And interestingly, the nature of your problem is changing, as you point out. As the leader, the more people you get in the organization, the complexity of the communication goes up geometrically. And there's a chart in one of my books that shows that if you go from 3 people to 25, you have I forget the number, 30 permutations of communications. But if you go from 3 to 100, it goes up by thousands. And so the first thing, to your point, is that the leader has to have awareness that they're going from building a product to building an organization that can deliver a product. And now they're really building something differently. where they started and their whole focus was around building widgets. Now they're building something just as tangible, but they can't see it, which is an organization that knows how to communicate, agree on what they want to do, and coordinate their activities to doing it. And it's very interesting that people, most of the business leaders I talk to, they don't see that the process of crafting strategy and execution is a process just like capturing a customer, CRM, customer relationship management. So I guess my first point is in line with something you're already saying. The first thing is that the leader has to recognize that this is happening to them. If they don't recognize it, they'll never start thinking about building this other thing, which is the business instead of the widget. Yes, that's right. And what we find is the larger the organization gets, when we come in and survey organizations and talk to people, we'll ask them what's working and what's not working, and always 100% of the time, the number one thing that employees say is wrong in their organization and that they're frustrated by is that they call it communication. They always say communication is broken. And the reason, of course, is communication is a label for many problems, and it's not a problem, it's a symptom. And so if you go back to the 3-person organization or the 5-person organization, many times the guy who's designing the product and selling it, in his left brain is what is going to be the next feature. In the right brain, he's talking to the salesperson. So there's no misalignment between what he's thinking about what's going to happen and what he's promising to the customer. But when he gets a design team thinking about what's next and a sales team that's separate, there's different images in the design team of what they're going to do, and they make promises to customers that are not aligned. And so the leader of the organization has to figure out, how do we create goals that are so clear that both the salesperson and the designer are on the same page. And that takes skill to create a really good goal where both people understand, instead of being in one mind, 2 minds understand the same thing. So the answer to your question is, first, they've got to be aware of the problem, and then secondly, they have to start putting in place a more rigorous way of defining their goals so that people can understand what those goals mean and either agree or disagree and then align themselves around it.
That's awesome. It's really, we are a kind of lucky because, this is a kind of engineering problem. So, when these kind of people in MSPs are engineering mindsets, they are building systems for their clients, right? Mm-hmm. Really complex systems. And if you think about building a business, it's a management discipline in that way, and this human factor. But the backbone is a systematic approach, some system.
Absolutely.
And I would like to go to that. Okay, so because what I have, and many leaders in the world have the problem that, I have a problem now. I learned something, I try to implement. So I have some little program, little system. Then I have another problem with, I don't know what, with management. I go learn something marketing, I put that. Oh, but these two seem to be communicating to each other. So we have now 2 systems, and we have the third and the fourth, and we see this discipline, that discipline, for marketing to sales and whatever, and we end up as a leaders, we are the ultimate integrators, right? We have read this book, we implemented something, and it's going to be like an amoeba. It's something you can't do because it's like interrelated systems. So what do you think about that? To how we can have predictably do and see what's going to be my next problem. I don't want to witness the problem and realize, yeah, that's my problem. No, I want to see in high accuracy, because their growing companies have the same amount of problems, same type of problems. I would like to see what's coming next. Yeah. So how you craft it? I'm sorry to,
I'm laughing because I think it was my second book. There was an author, a writer for the Wall Street Journal, and his name's Holman Jenkins, and he wrote an article one time about um, solving the one problem that makes solving all other problems easier.
Okay, that's what we are looking for.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're describing. I think so many times if you ask a business leader um, who what his biggest challenge is, he will state something in terms of a near-term problem. I've got a cash flow problem. I've got a customer side, a quality problem, a supplier problem. But the truth is really what you put your finger on. The biggest problem of any organization is how do you identify and solve problems? Yeah, it's not the problem you've got because you'll have another problem next year. And in fact, if you execute well and grow the organization, your problems will get bigger faster. And so what I find is the most challenging, and I'm really repeating myself, is to get the top leader to realize that's their biggest problem. And that's a mind shift change, and I kind of applaud what you're trying to do because you're trying to get people to see this. But once you see it, what we have found is that a successful process, when you design a process that any process, you want to decide up front what are the outcomes of that process. And then you try to identify repeatable steps that if you repeat those same steps, you'll get the same outcome. If you can't get repeatability in the process, then you can't innovate very well because when something gets better at the end of the process, you don't know whether it was an accident or an improvement. And so my point is, what we have found is that organizations, to be successful, they have to have processes that help them think about what they need on a long-term basis, say 3 to 5 years out, and then translate processes that take the formation of that vision 3 to 5 years out and translate it into, well, what do we have to do in the next near term, say 12 months, to advance towards that vision. And then they have to have processes that break that down even into 90-day chunks, some kind of smaller chunk. A year is too long. I mean, back to Weight Watchers. I can't go to Weight Watchers once a year. I have to go in a time frame that affects my behaviors. And so we have learned after years of experimenting that there are some natural seasonal cycles. You know, we have grown up with, as humans, with a year cycle, even a 7-year cycle, planning 5 to 7 years. And then you've got seasons that are 3 months long, and you've got a week. And yeah, and so we have found that one of the biggest things to do is to create a rhythm in an organization where there are communication points regularly talking about what's the 5-year vision, what's the 1-year vision, what's the 3-month vision, what am I going to do this week? And when you create these rhythms, what you're doing is causing communication to take place proactively instead of reactively. And that's a big challenge. It's a cultural change because most organizations don't know how to communicate regularly. And President Eisenhower, who was a military expert in the United States and became president in the 50s, he had a quote that I guess I didn't really understand the significance of it, but until the last few years. But he said, as a military person, he learned that plans are nothing. They're worthless, but planning is everything. And what we've learned about strategy execution is your plans are never right. They aren't, the moment you create them, the next day something has changed. And so what you've got to do is create a culture where you're constantly evaluating your goals and adjusting them based on what you've learned. And so you have to have a cultural transformation where there are processes in place where you're bringing the right people together on the right time frames, and you insist that those rhythms are maintained. And as you do that, you gradually identify problems earlier before they become big. And there's a lot of research that shows you the sooner you identify the problem, the lower the cost of solving that problem is. And by putting these building this culture, you will identify problems 2 and 3 years earlier than you would have otherwise.
Yeah,
and it transforms your success.
It's really interesting. Based on your book, I think I read this book in 2008 or 2009. After I read these Stephen Covey books and this whole personal development and that era, and that was really interesting. That what I was finding is that what I try to apply to myself as a person, like a leader, or having like time management principles, like purpose, goals, get these kind of rhythms, I found out the same things applies in businesses. And this book, which was really fascinating to me, it's basically the first book which is the templates and everything inside, so the methodology is that was the biggest thing, was the quarterly plan for me. Mm-hmm. And the quarterly plan was like you said in the book that the strategy is not about what we do, is eliminate the things, which probably Steve Jobs said before he died, that the biggest issue is what not to do. That's the decision, and that's a quarterly plan. It was like having the project-based things, what I have to work on once, and what's my regular duties. And during this conversation, I was able to figure out, okay, so as a leader, I have weekly that stuff. Okay, why we don't put it in a 1 hour session and I do all the weekly stuff? And get started with this kind of rhythm. And what was really, really awesome is that in this sheet, and this, it's a one sheet, it's nothing more. Mm-hmm. And you had this 520 hours in a quarter. Mm-hmm. And that's a capacity thinking. That was fascinating. Holy crap, I have 520 hours.
That's all you have.
And that's my decision. What I put in this 520, that's going to get the results. So okay, how we think, upfront proactively. So we stated, okay, that project, I'm fine. I get together. It was like 1,500 hours or something, and then I realized why I'm not going to anywhere. So I started to cut off. Okay, that's I'm not going to do. Not going. No. That was 1,000 hours. Yeah. Holy crap. And we went. It was a really hard and really hard process to get to the 520. And
think about the cumulative effect of what you just said. You just described your mindset of, I'm going to put 1,200 hours in my quarter of work, and you're only going to get 500 of it done. But pretend you're in an organization of 50 people, and they're all saying that.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
So everybody's promising 1,200 hours worth of stuff, of which only a fourth or a third of it's going to get done. And so you have no idea what's going to get done. Yeah. I mean, when you look at all 50 people. And you said something from somebody else, and they don't deliver it, and then you can't do your thing. And pretty soon, we call it that all organizations eventually outgrow their own ability to execute. And you may get to be Microsoft, where you're 100,000 people, but eventually it crumbles. The ability to execute crumbles.
So actually, that was fascinating because then after that I did with my leadership team. Same stuff. Yes. Everybody started 1,500s, make that promises, and we had to get and see each other's eyes and say, you know what, that's not going to happen. Yeah. We can't do that further because we are just lying to ourselves and yours. Yeah. And we get back and you know what, the biggest thing was, Gary, it was like a one sheet of obvious things. Yeah. And in this book we have you have like 50 or 60 different for processes and everything, really practical. But I think for us that was a big pivotal moment when we said, okay, we have to get rid of this mindset and plan and be really picky what we are starting. Because I'm a starter guy, and I think every entrepreneur wants to twice as much what he's capable of. So I would like to go through this notion that, okay, let's say somebody has the idea and okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. And then what?
Well, I will tell you the next phase. I think the quarterly, the discovery you're talking about quarterly is profound, and it is transforming. But what happens after you get those quarterly goals is the week starts, the day starts, and what we've learned the hard way is that, you've heard the phrase tyranny of the urgent, that urgent things.
Yep.
It's, back to Stephen Covey, he talked about important versus urgent. We all have phone calls and emails and crises that swamp our day-to-day lives. And what we have learned, that you cannot tell people to not do urgent things. What you have to do is make the things that are important more urgent than the urgent things. In other words, it's a displacement model. It's a lot easier to get water out of the glass by dumping something in and forcing the water out than it is turning the whole thing upside down. And that's the idea. Weekly, after you get the quarterly mindset, the thing that changes my behavior the most is weekly. I look over what my quarterly goals are, and I set some daily goals to make sure this week I move forward. I put some big rocks or some important things on my list so that the urgent doesn't push those things out of the way.
Yeah.
And so that's the next stage. And you talked about quarterly, but I would argue you have to both go down from there to weekly, but you have to go up from there to annual or multi-year. And we're working with a large client now, it happens to be a university, and they're getting the quarterly figured out, but what they're not figuring out is how to think about where do they want to be in 3 years. And they put, just like your 500 hours, they put 10 strategic projects on their 5-year plan, and they can't do 10 strategic projects. And we're just trying to help them discover, by listing the budget and the resources, hey, we can't do 10, we can only do 3. They try to do all 10, and it drives everybody crazy because
nothing's going to happen. Yeah, that's the big issue. I think based on the weekly stuff, doing weekly meetings to myself and doing this weekly planning, that was the easiest habit I was able to acquire in my whole life. And I think that's really couple of weeks I was missing this stuff. And we do it with our company in the startup phase, and I did it, and I think it's really awesome that you force the people in a habit that the big things coming up. And what I seen, that the trouble was all the time that we commit ourselves, and the world was coming, and everybody went different direction. And what I was thinking is that we created this kind of zones in our calendars. What was like, I have a task to do which is like 3 hours. I created like in a section in my calendar that 3 hours section will be there.
Schedule it.
Pre-schedule that type of big rocks. That was really a great thing, because I try to, because when we run this MSP, or when I was running the MSP in Hungary, what I've seen that lots of people, we are in a company who are solving other people's problems. So we are always putting fires. And with preparation, you were able to create this kind of overlapping schedule that everybody had like half a day for time to relax and not bugging to each other. So I think these type of really little habits help a lot for the individuals and for the leaders as well. And what I had, and I don't know how did I learn it, but when I was really tough with my brother, we took off the Wednesdays. So we didn't go to the company, no emails, just reading books and learn and something. And that was the highest, on my career, and in success rate, that was really, really high. Because I had 1 day off. And we told the people, we are not there. You have to do the stuff. We didn't get too much risk on that, of course, because it's 1 day, it's not 2 weeks of something like that. But it was a big lesson to me. So these little stuff, and then I was stealing most of them from your book, so that's because I like, because what I did is that I went to the book. You have the resources, and lots of great books there. So I picked them. Okay, I got it. I need to read it and stuff like that. So just switch gears a little bit, Gary. Is that I would like to give the audience the impression that what we are thinking is a systematic way to build a company. So can you just describe really quickly what you've written in the book of 6 disciplines, how is it thing together? Because I think it's lots of things is common sense, but it's not common practice, and it's not a rocket science, but you have to realize that that's a systematic approach which you have to be disciplined, and that's
Well, the 6 disciplines really, as you mentioned, are a collection of best practices that have been proven. But what we found is most organizations haven't thought about how to put them all together. And so very quickly, discipline 1 is, we call it decide what's important. It's one of the processes that the leadership has to go through to decide who this organization wants to be, mission, vision, values. It's a long-term thinking about the identity of the organization. And it sounds easy, but it's not. And we find when we bring a group of people together, the senior leaders, they seldom really agree on what the vision for the company is. The second discipline says once you've got that foundation laid, some picture of what you're trying to build, then you start building intermediate and near-term goals, 1 year, 3-year kind of goals. But these goals have to be very well crafted and specific enough so that the engineering guy we talked about earlier and the sales guy can look at the goal and understand what the leadership means. If the goals are fuzzy, their understanding will be fuzzy. And if their understanding is fuzzy, their actions will be fuzzy. So that's the second discipline. It's not an easy thing to learn, but you can do it. The third discipline is what we call aligned systems. It's more of an organizational discipline. Okay, given we've got these goals we're pursuing, how do we make sure we have the right people in the right spots, the right processes, the right technologies? How do you align the resources of your organization to the purpose? Then the fourth discipline is working the plan. That's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. It's the quarterly cycles and the weekly cycles. It's the things you do to hold yourself accountable, to stay focused on what you said was important. And that's the hardest part. That's where 90% of the effort is in fighting the daily battles. And then discipline 5 is innovate purposefully. And that means that everybody has to be a problem solver. If you're going to have clear goals, that sets up the ability to innovate. The old adage that solving a problem is you're halfway there when you define the problem. Well, it's the same way for the average worker in your organization. Their ability to innovate will be much higher if you can be really clear about what they need to accomplish and how it fits into the organization. So that's the fifth discipline. The sixth we call step back, and what it's trying to address is the fact that it's probably easiest to understand from an analogy. One time I was on a vacation on the eastern coast of Florida, and I was walking in the surf on the beach, and it was interesting that if I kept my head down and looked at the surf, I would walk in and out because the surf was drifting in and out, and I couldn't walk straight. But if I would look up at a post down the way, I could immediately walk straight. And business owners are swimming in the surf of their business, being pulled left and right, and they don't even realize it. And you have to create regular routines for looking up. And like your Wednesday day off is like that. Your weekly planning is like that, your quarterly planning. So it is a discipline. You have to know that there's value in taking time to get out of the business so you can see it more clearly. So those 6 disciplines are designed to all work together in an integrated whole.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everybody who is serious to build the business and build a client's business should have the book, because you know what, my observation is the following: that most of the managed service providers are acting like virtual CIOs or CIOs of their companies, and the same stuff applies totally. You
Yes.
have to help them. Okay, how IT can give your competitive edge something, right? Okay,
Hmm.
how we are going to do that? That's the second discipline. Third, what's the processes we have to implement and technologies to make it happen? Fourth,
Absolutely.
how we work on your strategy. Fifth, how we innovate day in day out, and then how to evaluate ourselves. So what I try to preach to the people is that you have to be a new way of manager or something like that, and help them to show them what's the best practices now to build an agile company. And how you can do that? You are doing this service and you are doing what you are preaching in your company. So basically that's how you can see their problem, their issues, their struggles, because most of the time you created a software, right? The people see the problem here and the
Hmm.
solution is there because
Yeah.
basically the problem is there. Just they
Yes.
see the different way. So I think us, the technology community or the IT community, we need to address that we have to understand their problems and symptoms and help them to go back to the real root problem and address the root problem with disciplined effort management and then tools. Because you probably witnessed, probably not in Solomon software, but your competitors, what was the success rate for these type of initiatives, right?
Yes.
I don't
No,
know
it's
what's
not
the,
great.
it's not great. Why?
Yeah.
And that's everything explained why, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the IT professional, I mean, the way you describe that is they have an ability to transform, be change agents
Exactly.
in these organizations, because to the extent they understand this model that you were describing in the bit organizations, they don't understand it. If they can bring that vision in there, it's almost like they're doubling their value. They're not only providing technical expertise, they're providing strategic clarity, which will increase the value of the technical expertise they have. So I think it's a great observation.
Exactly, and what I see is that the same stuff applies. You know what difference between Apple and Lenovo computers? I'm not going to go to this big thinking, but not so much.
Hmm.
The big thing: who is selling the vision?
Hmm.
Apple is selling a vision that
Hmm.
that the your computer is part of you and your identity,
Yeah.
and they sell the vision and sell the same hardware in a double price. So what
Yeah.
I thinking is that if these IT people go and sell the vision to their clients and then help them to execute those stuff, it's, you know what, IT is getting into commodity, like plug in plug out.
Yeah.
The scarcity is who is the smart guy who can find out the right mix of the different cloud-based and any type of services to my needs.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of that's you are not able to go as a vendor and sell your product. You have to understand them and their struggles, and then
Yeah.
help them to make it happen. So I think IT companies are really in a sweet spot of this whole change and this 21st century kind of thing, and they have to learn how to act on that. So if you have like three big wisdom or just suggestion, advice, something like that to the end of this really great talk, just fire. What would you suggest them to start, or just some real takeaway that okay, start next Monday or now.
Well, I think you just covered the most important one, which was to think deeply about what is the value they're bringing to their customers. And I like your analogy of Apple versus Lenovo or Dell or whatever. One's selling vision and the other's selling a product. And so the IT specialist needs to really come to grips with, well, what does that mean in their identity, who they are. The second thing I would say is that studying materials like you've mentioned, the E-Myth book or my book, things that help them see what the CEO should see. The CEO, many of their CEOs don't understand this. And so it's to their advantage to be able to explain and articulate this vision. So that would be the second thing I would say. And then the third thing is practice it. You're not going to get good at this without trying it. And it's going to feel awkward. It's kind of like changing your golf grip. Instead of talking about technology, you're talking about strategy. And but it'll be worth it because it'll be transforming. I mean, look at Starbucks. You know, who would have thought you could enter a market to sell coffee, for Pete's sakes? The coffee market ought to have been saturated.
Yeah,
And yet,
yeah, because what we are preaching is the same. Apple and Starbucks reframed the
they
clients.
reframed it.
Reframed
They
that. You know
redefined
what?
it.
You can buy a cup of coffee for five times higher price, because and they opened a huge market. So what I see in IT, 99% of the people you're asking, tell me what IT means. Servers, infrastructure, devices. I can't disagree more. This is your passport to the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
And if you are able to reframe these people, you are opening a huge, huge market. You are not competing when the other people are.
I absolutely agree with you. I find that when I think about our clients moving through the 6 disciplines, the aligned systems is where they run into the most difficult problems, because once they've identified the strategy and set some goals, they always find that their technology is in the way, and they don't know how to they don't know how to cope with that. So I think you're carrying a great message. This reframing idea is a great vision to how to transform themselves. They're change agents.
Exactly. So actually what I used to say, you have to reframe yourself before you reframe your clients.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Well, that sums it up. That really is what my 3 points were all about. You got to reframe yourself before you can reframe others.
Gary, I'm really grateful you had this hour with us, and I believe we need to carry over this conversation in different aspects, because I see that you are the best guy for teaching the people what's going on, because I'm the young maverick. You have the wisdom, and you have the background of your whole life, and you are half of your career now. So
you're trying to say I'm old.
No, you are the great hair guy. So that's how we can do. Gary,
yeah, okay. Well,
I really appreciate that, and thank you for your help. So what you used to say, the best
is ahead.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.